Hello and welcome to Connect MKE. I'm your host, Denise Callaway. Milwaukee is a big city, and like many other big cities across the country, since 2020, Milwaukee has experienced a spike in some violent crimes. It's something that not only concerns citizens, but the Milwaukee Police Department as well. Joining us now is the Chief of the Milwaukee Police Department, Jeffrey Norman. Chief Norman, thanks so much for being with us, and thanks so much for having us here with you.
Thank you.
How would you describe your biggest challenges that the department is facing?
Well, I've always said the biggest challenge for the department is trust. Understanding that building trust with our community, with our partners, our elected officials, that we will always have the best interests of our community in mind, and that our department only works as well as the community allows us. And trust helps provide information in regards to incidents of crime, engagement, understand that we are responsive toward the community. The only way that you can really have a truly impactful relationship is to have a trusting relationship. So Milwaukee Police Department is committed to continue to work on trust, being out there engaged, being in corners where we're not expected, continue to be in corners that we are expected, to ensure that we're always creating, nurturing, and respecting the trust that's given to us.
So trust is that key piece. How would you describe that level of trust that exists right now between the department and the community?
So I always put in three pots. Many parts of our community, we do have a lot of trust. So others, we have somewhat, and I'm realistic enough to know that in others, we do not have any. And as part of the leadership of this department, part of the efforts of working on all three pots all the time, because it's important to make sure you're nurturing and building relationships with all segments of our community. We are expected to serve all.
How do you begin to address that pot where the trust is not where you want it to be? What kind of efforts do you begin to make to increase that trust level?
So community engagement is one of the cornerstones of this department. In fact, it's part of my vision and mission. And it's important for all of us to understand we all have a role in building trust. And so being out there, and I say community engagement more than just the popcorn, the ice cream cones, more than balloons, being at a reckless driving conversation, being there for a faith-based activity, engaging in our schools, being part of town halls or elected officials. All of those are ways to be able to, again, nurture, to create, to introduce yourself, but also to become familiar. I want the Milwaukee Police Department to be just part of the community. Not something like, oh, thank you for being here. Not a surprise, not a, my goodness, you're really taking time out to be actually part of the everyday fabric of, engagement, of responding, of being a relationship builder, a community sustainer, just part of the normalcy of our community in Milwaukee.
And as you said, in some communities, some parts of our community that does exist.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
So one thing I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about are some of those other challenges that do exist. And one of them really is the homicide rate. When we take a look at 2022, it was the third year in a row that there was a record number of homicides, with the north side and the northwest side hit the hardest. What are some of the factors that you know are causing that increase?
So first, I'd like to start off by saying the police department in this city takes no pride in having a third increase in our homicide rate. If anything, that recommits ourselves to the urgency to make an impact, to be there to turn that tide in a more positive direction. But one is always too many anyways. I think that it's important to us to understand that, yes, we have a record homicide, but any day that we have a homicide is not a good day. Seeing the dynamics of what drives this homicide rate in our city, we know that a large part is unfortunately unknown. But what we do know is that domestic violence and the inability to resolve your conflict, meaning conflict argument, is the two main factors in our homicide rate. In fact, it almost contributes to half of the homicides that took place in our city. So with that understanding gives you a base to go and say, how do we impact? How do we intervene? And it's important to understand that it's not just the Milwaukee Police Department's responsibility alone. Work with partners, work with different institutions within our community to truly make not only a direct impact, but a sustainable and consistent impact.
Are there some partnerships that you feel are beginning to make a difference, that offer the potential to bring about some change?
Absolutely. We have a robust relationship with the Sojourner Family Peace Center. That is one of the institutions that has what's called the Domestic Violence High Risk Team. And this team has been around for years, working with the executive director, Karen Petrie. We have a commitment of being able to be part of these conversations of putting on the radar what those cases that have some potentially have some bad outcomes, whether it's going to be, again, that there's going to be more violence up to the point of homicide, or someone may be imprisoned, or other issues that come out of not taking care of these what's considered high-risk domestic violence situations. So the Milwaukee Police Department has put more resources into that particular effort. Understanding that, seeing the program that is so successful, I believe out of 3,000 cases, they will only unfortunately lose one. And again, there's never too many. At least one is too many. And so seeing that type of success gives us a renewed sense of being able to say, okay, this works when we put our efforts behind it. But also working with a lot of our culturally sensitive, domestic violence groups out there. Understand that there are cultural sensitivities that can bring to the table that helps us do more of the engagement I talk about, so that we can have better conversations and know how to impact what we're seeing, again, is a disturbing trend with the domestic violence.
And when it comes to people's inability to resolve conflict, what can you do about that? Are there programs that you're working with in that effort as well?
So between the Office of Violence Prevention, I know some of our faith-based members have been doing work in mediation, work in conflict resolution training. So those are some, I would say, hopeful activities that people will really take a hold of and utilize in their day-to-day. I don't believe there's enough out there that we can say can really be put forward to our community, where I believe it's an ongoing conversation. We're seeing unfortunate outcomes that are bad because of poor conflict resolution, because we have the accessibility of firearms in those incidents when we see that there is arguments that just unfortunately go really, really wrong. And then seeing that anger being unfortunately connected to a firearm, you're just looking for disastrous results.
Let's talk a little bit about firearms. Gun sales in Wisconsin are double what they were 20 years ago. Are weapons too accessible? Have we reached a point when we look at the number of homicides that are committed using firearms, the number of people who are injured in other acts of violence using firearms? Have we reached a point where the city, the police department, need to ask the legislature for some kind of relief and help to address the issue of the proliferation of weapons in our city?
So whenever it comes to addressing a multifaceted, complicated issue, I'm looking for all solutions beyond just the legislator, for our community, to our elected officials, to our community stakeholders. We all have a responsibility to deal with at the heart of this issue. It's behaviors. There's a lot of different tools out there that can create harm, but if you have the wrong behaviors attached, whether it's negligent in regards to making sure you put up that firearm in a responsive manner, or you're talking about in regards to how do you resolve a conflict or argument in a productive way. And so whatever that can help deal with behaviors, making sure that we are, again, putting out the right type of support for the mental health issues or the issues in regards to, again, understanding the gravity of the responsibility of owning a firearm, we'll be making some true impact.
And you're right, there's no one thing that you can do that would make a difference. But is there something the legislature could do to help Milwaukee and other communities as it relates to firearm number of firearms that are there, whether it's even stricter penalties for individuals who are caught with weapons. Again, this is a multifaceted thing. Is there something that can be done from the legislative point of view as well?
Well, I leave it up to the legislators. I know that, at the end of the day, there's a lot of different lobbyists and individuals who are, put into that type of work to guide and, give them, suggestions. All I can say is that if anything that we can do to address behaviors, whether it's, the not being responsible with your firearm, I think that is an important discussion point that the legislators can, dive into, saying, okay, what can we do to address these behaviors out here in our community? Where you have individuals who are leaving, handguns unattended for their children to unfortunately get a hold of and harm themselves or harm others. Where you have situations where individuals are getting a hold of firearms in our vehicles that are not being, secured properly, where now you have them in hands of. And I say young ones, I'm talking about anyone who's not of age to carry a handgun, 20 and under, in regards to these behaviors that we're seeing, unfortunately, time and time again in our community. So if anything that anyone can do is to address behaviors, I'm all for it.
I do want to ask you about a situation that has happened. Over the past 9 months, there have been 3 homicides involving the Black transgender community. Prior to that, the last one was in 2010. There's a lot of rhetoric, in some cases hostility, regarding the trans community. How are you working with the trans community so people know how to be aware and how to protect themselves?
Well, first of all, we understand we serve all, and we are expected to be professional with all. Looking at some of the more specific parts of our community, especially when we talk about the LGBTQ plus community, we have a number of different initiatives that helps build relationships, but we're always looking for more. We have SOP, standard operating procedure, in regards to our expected interactions, how to be sensitive in regards to this particular interaction that will guide our officers or guide our department. We also have an LGBTQ plus liaison, Sergeant Guadalupe Velasquez. And so that is a liaison to help, again, build bridges and understanding that there are people that we can talk with and field questions, concerns, and be able to have an ongoing dialogue. We're also part of this initiative called the Safe Place Initiative. And this is where, for the LGBTQ plus community, a cooperation or a collaboration with our businesses, where if there are concerns of harm or any other particular, dangers that the individual is fearful of, there's a safe place to go in and report and be able to have that as a safe place to interact with the police department and the individual. And so there's always more that we can do. I know that any particular criminality that takes place in our city, we take it very seriously. We are expected to be professional, to be responsive, and that, again, always looking for opportunities to foster more, to engage more, to have more connections with our community members, all our community members.
Reckless driving continues to be a big issue in the streets of Milwaukee. There are some initiatives that have been put in place, including confiscating vehicles. Are those working quickly enough, and are there other steps that the department can take to help get this under control?
I know that, we are putting forth a lot of different multifaceted efforts. For some, they might say it's not moving fast enough. Others, they say moving at a good clip. I would say that we're moving in a positive direction. Seeing that, when we have enacted the towing policy, which was back in May of 2022, accomplishing over 218 tows. Now, that can be a glass half empty, a glass half full. We'd like to see is a glass half full. For those individuals who have been towed, we have not seen a repeat in that behavior for those individuals who have been in that infraction, but also no repeat behaviors when we have sued individuals who were called the most egregious violators. Twice we had a pretty almost an unorthodox, but a new initiative where we have put forth the power of the nuisance law and sued reckless drivers and made sure that there is accountability from the court system. But we have still a robust traffic safety unit. We have a robust engagement with our community, working with many of our community stakeholders for Vision Zero, where we are working towards no fatalities in our community. So I would say that the Milwaukee Police Department is putting forth a lot of different efforts, supporting our community, being part of the engagement, working with our partners from the government. Department of Public Works putting forth efforts in redesigning streets, ensuring that there is a change in the roadways, and ensuring that we are being communicated with each other about possible opportunities. Where can roundabouts be, or putting forth narrow streets. So putting a lot of efforts in, and I believe that that should be heartwarming to a community that is concerned and seeing that their department is being extremely responsive and putting that engagement where we are saying that we hear you, community. We're putting forth the efforts on all of your behalf.
And again, just as is the case with homicides, it's a complex issue.
Absolutely. When you talk about reckless driving, it's more than just young ones. You come across individuals who are in their respective jobs as for driving, older ones, people of all different walks of life. So we really got to recalibrate our heads to think that it's just the kids who didn't get a driver's license. That is the case, but that's not all the case. And if we don't take a responsibility of us all, understand that we need to model good behavior. Going to work, don't run a red light. You are, trying to get the kids, don't rush to get the kids. Slow down. And so all those things play an important role in that we all have a responsibility in safer streets.
I do want to talk about the department's personnel study that was done. Was released just a few weeks ago. 211 pages. That's a lot of information to look at.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure there's one point that did not surprise you, and that is the department is short-staffed. What are some of the recommendations to address that issue? There's the obvious, hire more officers, but folks have to go through the training and the class. So there's some other things that can be done to get more sworn officers on the street.
Right. And definitely welcome the Matrix study, understanding that that is something that was put forth, a couple years ago in regards to having a deep dive look into our department, and that there's a company program, or not program, but a study from Ernst & Young. So we embrace it all. As the responsible of finite resources, we need to make sure that we're being held accountable, that we're being as efficient or as effective as possible. But some of the recommendations, reallocation of personnel, we do that all the time, depending on cost of service, needs of the respective districts. Also going through a civilianization process. How do you civilianize to take situations where you are having a sworn officer actually do a non-sworn duty? And so that's a process, not a quick process. You got to deal with, contract negotiations, rules and laws. So it's a steady process, but we understand that there's opportunity in that. Also, that we look at from the standpoint of how do we take some of the burden off the officers in responding to calls, so to free them up for more serious. So we got the online reporting, where you're able to call in certain reports so you don't have to have an officer respond. Utilizing some of our non-sworn, our community service officers, what we call CSOs. Those help in regards to dealing with lower level incidents. Maybe you have a theft report or, a simple accident, where you can have those individuals help out for those duties and keeping your sworn officers available. So we're looking at a lot of different, options. Always looking forward to seeing, more suggestions, because at the end of the day, we should be held accountable for efficient and effective service.
One of the things the Matrix study pointed to was proactive policing, which basically, as I understand it, is those things you do to work to stop crime before it happens, having those connections in the community, more patrols. But the study found that there isn't enough time for proactive policing. How do you begin to address that?
So one, that's a difficult, what they put forth of the proactive policing, and we couldn't really understand that, study part. we utilize cost for service. We utilize a lot of different other factors in regards to that. There is a different levels of cost of service, P1s, which is life and liberty. Those are, resource challenges. When you have a lot of cost of service, I know they talked about District 1 and District 6 have more proactive policing. Well, one, they don't have as many costs for service as District 4, 5, and 3 and 7. And also that, the recommended staffing levels, we are pretty close to in regards to what the Matrix recommended, what we are currently at. But it's an ongoing fluid situation. We're losing officers to resignations to other departments. We're losing officers for retirement. So it's an ongoing challenge to ensure that we have the right balance, but also that we utilize other parts of our department for some of the proactivity that wasn't taken into consideration in this particular report. Traffic safety unit is not assigned to any particular district, but that is a proactive unit going out enforcing motor vehicle laws. So it's not as easy to explain in regards to just, again, how they use their study and come up with their particular, numbers. But we are very sensitive to this. We understand that we police the entire city, not under my leadership or leadership of those who work within executive command staff or command officers allow picking and choosing in regards to who gets police services, who do not. We all get police services, especially as a resident in this city, understanding that it's important to have that expectation fulfilled in a fair and professional manner.
So one of the things that the study did recommend, though, or suggest, is taking a look at moving officers who might be in those lower call for service areas and moving some of them to some of the areas that have more or higher calls for service. Is that something that's an option? Is it something that's being done now?
We've been doing that. I mean, again, this is a fluid, every 4 to 6 months looking at in regards to what that particular balance looked like. But also, at the end of the day, especially when it comes to cost of service, depending on what the incident is for that particular day, all officers, we are City of Milwaukee police officers, can get called to be responsive to those particular needs. Whether you got an incident on the north side and something happened on the south side, you got to call them up there to help out. So we're attempting to continue to be ahead of the curve in regards to balancing the needs and making sure there's responsiveness. But definitely, again, appreciate the suggestion for the Matrix study, but we got it.
Okay. I want to ask you just one other quick question about that, because it goes back to the issue that you talked about around building trust and that being the most important challenge. One of the phrases that study used was extreme inequity. When that's out there and the community sees it and they hear it, and everybody, it's like, you're looking for where you are on the map and what it says about the district in which you receive services. How do you address that? Because that doesn't help with the trust issue if people feel like they're getting the short end of the stick.
Absolutely. Again, we didn't create the report. That's not something that I think, from a professional standpoint, responsible type of terminology. But the North Side districts have more officers than the South Side districts. So to say extreme inequities, and that was based off of cost for service, other needs in regards to the, we have an unfortunate higher number of firearm issues. And so to say that that's, imbalance, I guess that's their, viewpoint, but I respectfully disagree. Understand that, again, when you look at our officers that are assigned to these respective districts and what this study recommends, we're pretty close. And so there is inequities in regards to calls. Certain districts do not get as many calls for service, especially as our North Side district. So those are things that we take in consideration when we talk about staffing and responsiveness. But at the end of the day, we also expect that if there's a need, we draw resources from all over the city to help out for the instances when things do get pretty challenging for that particular day.
One thing that we do want to talk about and acknowledge is that policing is a dangerous job. And unfortunately, we were all tragically reminded of that with the killing, the murder of Officer Jervings. officers see so much firsthand. I've heard people describe it as it's a job where you see people every day on what may be the worst day of their life. What kind of supports are there in place to help officers with what they see every day?
You're absolutely right. It is a challenge. One, we need to be intentional as leaders to give them a little balance. Being able to be part of engagements that remind them why they got into this profession. Remind them in regards to that no officer came on the particular career with a, who cares about the world. They have a light inside of them. So we need to continue to nurture that, where that engagement aspect helps remind you that, there's a lot of good out there in our community and that you need to be a part of it and see that. There's intentionality on our part as a department. But also we do have a pretty robust wellness team. We have, contracted psychologists and a number of different therapists that work with her. Also, we work with a chaplain program, and we have a wellness team that is rounded out with a four-legged wellness officer, Crush. And all of these particular, parts work together to address a lot of things, where it's debriefing for officers who've been through a traumatic situation, having one-on-one therapy sessions, having Crush come in and to a roll call or to a district station or a division room, and get pet and hugged and get your hopes and spirits up. So there is a lot of intentionality, and that's important for us in regards to that. We know we need to have officers healthy in body and also in mind. And so working on that, and also not being afraid to ask for help. As you talked about, one of our recent members, unfortunately, was killed in the line of duty. So we asked for outside help. There is a group called LEADER, law enforcement death response team. All across the state came in and did a number of debriefings for all our 2,200 members. Because it's more than just the sworn officers who are affected by this. We have people working our communication division. They're the 911 operators. They have to hear these particular traumatic situations. We have individuals supporting officers from the non-sworn side. And so we need to be, again, addressing all of those pain, trauma, and concerns as a one team.
We've appreciated the time that you've given us to talk about both the challenges and successes that the Milwaukee Police Department is having. But you can't be everywhere. Tell me what you need citizens to do.
I think that at the end of the day, do what speaks to you. That being a bystander is unacceptable. There is something that you can find some type of, drawn to, committed to, whether it's helping with a local church with, the Sunday school with the kids, or, going to a, community group, or, being a part of some of the efforts in regards to putting out the word about reckless driving. I always say to the community, just do something.
Chief Norman, thank you so much for being with us. We really do appreciate it. We would like to thank you all for being with us as well. I'm your host, Denise Callaway. Thanks for joining us on Connect MKE. We hope to see you again next week.